Hey everybody, welcome to Always Bored, Never Boring, and the final instalment in my series on the Better Angels scenario for The Walking Dead No Sanctuary from Cryptozoic Entertainment. I've finished the playthrough, so this is just kind of like a wrap up and final thoughts type mini review type thing. So if you have stuck with me through the whole playthrough, then thank you very much. I really do appreciate it. This hasn't been one of my most successful series, it has to be said. I don't think there's a huge amount of interest in this game, and I think that's largely to do with the way the Kickstarter was handled. I think a lot of people weren't very happy with the quality of the materials that they received, and then I guess the game isn't, it's not stellar. Is my opinion of it as it stands at the moment. So I guess it's kind of a combination of sort of resentment and general apathy has caused it to sort of drift out of general consciousness, I guess. And yeah, I don't think this is a game that people are going to be talking about for years to come. I really don't. But this particular video, all I'm doing really is I kind of wanted to sort of sum up my experience playing the solo variant of the Better Angels scenario. I'll talk a little bit about the mechanisms of the game itself, but I'm going to save my final thoughts on the game system as a whole for when I do my written review, which will be available on alwaysboredneverboring.com at some point when I've kind of finally nailed down exactly how I feel about it, because this game is a bit of an odd duck. I've played enough games that I generally get a good sense very early on whether I'm going to enjoy them or not. I will always give games a really fair crack of the whip before I will attempt to review them. With minor exceptions, there was that Lord of the Rings Nazgul game, which did not deserve any more of my time than it had, being one of the most awful, dire pieces of board game nonsense I've ever had the misfortune to put on my table. But normally I will give a game a fair crack of the whip before I sort of nail down exactly how I feel about it. And but usually I kind of have a good sense early on. And this game's a bit odd in that regard, because I kind of don't, because everything in this game works really nicely, and it all sort of it kind of does work. It's mechanically very sound, I guess is what I'm trying to say, but at the same time it feels very procedural, and when you're playing the game, there seems to be, you're constantly making decisions. There's loads of decisions to make. It's like on your turn you start, the leader has a choice of 2 event cards, and you have to choose the colour of the card, and you also have to consider what the active event is going to be and whether you think people are going to be able to achieve that event. You have to look at the neglect effect on the card that you're not going to use and see how that's going to hurt you. You need to look at your hand of cards and see if you've got something that can be compliant, and whether your friends around the table in the cooperative version of the game, which is obviously the standard version, whether they can be compliant or whether they're going to cause you stress because they're going to have to do something different. And so just right from the very start of the very first turn, there's like loads of decisions to make, and then you choose your event card, and then you play your card, and when you play your card, you then have a choice of whether you're going to use the action on that card or whether you're going to use one of the basic actions. You get a maneuver, so you seem to have loads and loads and loads and loads of choices, and yet at the end of it, at the end of your turn, you might have moved one space on the board and maybe knocked over a zombie. Usually they get back up again. Occasionally you get to defeat one, which means you get to remove it from the board. Hooray! But that almost always involves threat, which then immediately respawns the zombie. Hooray! And it feels a little bit like Much Ado About Nothing to a degree. And it's interesting because it is kind of like micromanagement. It's like your whole decision process for the round equates into seconds in the real world. I mean, choosing your event, and then whether you're going to be compliant or defiant, using your action, firing your gun, moving a space. In the real world, it would be a matter of seconds. But at the table, it can take quite a long time to have all of those discussions and all of those thoughts. And there is quite a lot to think about and quite a lot to keep track of. The rules are very procedural. Even just rolling the dice, you have to you have to resolve dice in a specific order. You first have to you play the action on your card, or the action. You get a free event basically, like on this particular card it says gain 1 focus, so you would gain that focus, and then you have to create your pool of dice based on your stress and your other bonuses and things. Then you roll those dice, and then you have to you first have to apply your exerts and see if you want to turn those into successes. Then you have to look at the focus results and see if you want to turn those into successes. Then you apply the successes. Then you have to apply the threats. Then you have to look back at your card and apply your skull and crossbones. And then if you've got any focus dice left over, you have to you can turn those into focus tokens that go on your character sheet. And that's something that I forgot to do a couple of times in the playthrough. I'm aware of. I might have had a slightly easier time, but I also think there was one point towards the end of the game where I forgot to pick up one exertion from requiring a bit of stress that I forgot to apply, which meant I still would have won the game, but it would have been even tighter, I think. But so it's a very procedural. So again, it's very bitty. It's very granular. And there's lots of things to keep track of. Lots of tokens coming in and out of play. You also have a special ability on your character sheet, and other characters can also use the special ability on your character sheet. So everyone's sort of looking at each other's boards all the time, and it feels clunky. It just feels a little bit. It doesn't flow really smoothly. I'm a big fan of games that you can put the rulebook away and just play. There are games like Warhammer Quest, Silver Tower, to pick a sort of Ameritrash type game, and then there's games like Lords of Waterdeep, where you can just play. You just play the game. You don't refer back to the rulebook. You don't need to. Everything is very clear and smooth, and you can sort of lose yourself in the atmosphere of the game. And if it's a theme heavy game, then you can sort of immerse yourself in that board game reality for a while. And I don't really get that here. The mechanisms are thematic. It's, there are certain things. It'll say things like there's a sudden rainstorm, and then if you're outside of a building, you have to exert. And so thematically, that all makes sense. You're out in a storm, and it becomes more difficult. You're slopping through the mud. You're gonna get tired quicker, and if you fire your gun, it raises your threat level, and your threat level will in turn generate zombies, and the zombies will then come and munch on you. So it all works thematically, but it just feels very mechanical, and that's how I feel at the moment about the game overall. So I'm kind of enjoying playing it, but I'm not sort of feeling immersed in the world. It feels like there's just too many things I have to keep checking back on. I have to keep looking back at the rule book, making sure that I'm completing the dice actions in the right order, making sure that I'm not overlooking whether I can use a token, whether a token has to go on my character sheet, whether I can take a token off. And that's not helped by the fact the rulebook isn't great. It's not awful. I have seen much worse, but it's not a great rulebook. And the biggest problem with the rulebook is when you get to a scenario that sort of plays outside the realms of the normal structure of the game, which is what we had here with Better Angels. Better Angels is a 2-player game which pits 2 players against each other. You get a special deck of cards for each character, so that actually says Better Angels on, and which gives you new actions that you wouldn't have in the normal cooperative game. In the cooperative game, you would have a completely different deck of cards with different actions on them. So the game is set up like that, so you've got Shane and Rick playing cards that trying to cause each other to exert, and if Rick runs out of health, he dies and it's game over. If Shane runs out of health, he comes back as a zombie, and then you have to kill him again. And there are certain issues, even before you get to playing it as a solo game, but even just playing it as a 2-player game, that are quite apparent. The main thing being, it gives you no guidance on what you can do once Shane is a walker. Once he comes back, I mean, and we saw this in my playthrough. But it says that the player controlling Shane now controls all of the zombies, but it doesn't give you any guidance on how you control the zombies. And then also, of course, we have this issue of whether Walker Shane is classed as a walker and therefore can be affected by cards that say defeat a walker, or whether he's still classed as Shane and can only be affected by cards that say make Shane exert. That's not defined anywhere. It's just not on the scenario sheet. And there's nothing in the rules to cover it. So that's a problem in itself, and it gets a bit harder still when you play the solo variant, because the cards are worded in such a way that they assume you're playing the two-player game. They're not covering you in that solo situation. For example, this particular card here says place one of your survivor tokens in a space within range 1. If Shane is in a space with at least one of your survivor tokens, he may not perform a move maneuver this round. Now, performing a move maneuver is something that a survivor can do, so it would be something your opponent can do, because in each turn you get an action and a maneuver. So yeah, that makes sense. In a two-player game, you play that card, your opponent won't be able to make a move maneuver. You'd be able to make other types of maneuver, but not a move. But in the solo variant, your opponent isn't making a move maneuver. There is an AI sheet which says that he might move. So I had to make a call on the fly that I assumed that this card would also apply for the AI's standard move, which isn't called a move maneuver and doesn't follow any of the rules for maneuvers. So it's sloppy, I guess, is the best way to put it. It's sloppy. It doesn't give you all the information you need. It doesn't give you enough information for you to feel confident that you're playing exactly right. And that's a shame. So, unfortunately, I hadn't really paid enough attention to the end game scenario when I decided to create this playthrough and do this on film. So anybody who watched the last episode will know that I got quite annoyed because I got sort of the last episode of the series and suddenly realised that I wasn't really sure how to proceed. Yeah, which is never a good thing. So yeah, I think I'm in two minds about the game itself. I don't mind. I don't mind all the quality, by the way. Lots of people got very upset about the quality of the miniatures and things like that, and I actually think they are board game quality miniatures. They're not great, but they're not awful. Did Cryptozoic Entertainment oversell the miniatures during the Kickstarter? Yes, I think they did. I think they sold this as something that miniatures collectors would love, and so I can understand why some people aren't happy with that. Personally, I play Games Workshop games, and I collect metal, resin, and high quality tabletop war game miniatures. Those are the miniatures that I collect for their aesthetic beauty and also obviously for the games that I use them in, but they're the miniatures that I paint, things like that. So I don't mind that the miniatures aren't great in this. That doesn't bother me at all. And everything else is okay. The cards are good enough quality. Some of the tokens are ridiculous. I did show during the video series that I was using these yellow discs to track threat, because the token that came in the game is that. So yeah, that's a token. That's a normal size token. So yeah, so that's a little bit of bloody nonsense from Cryptozoic there. But yeah, so I guess I've waffled long enough, and the point is, I'm not happy with this Better Angels scenario. I don't think it's been well thought out. I don't think it's been fully fleshed out. It was a scenario that sort of came as part of the Kickstarter. I can't remember whether it was an add-on or whether it was a stretch goal. But either way, it was obviously something that I feel that it was something that was chucked in without being fully developed, and doesn't have everything that you need to get the most out of it. But going back to the game system as a whole, It's one of those game systems that I get the same feeling about it like I did about Warhammer Quest: The Adventure card game, which is, funnily enough, by the same designers, in that mechanically it's sound, but it's too mechanical. It feels dry. It feels very like you're stepping through processes, and much like in Warhammer Quest: The Adventure card game, where you would gradually chip away the hit points of a monster. I mean, it could take you several turns to kill a goblin because you're just very, very gradually chipping away at them whilst your own health bar is gradually being chipped away. You get that same thing here. You're doing nth degrees of micromanagement to move one space on the board. You're making 20 decisions to do one thing, and there's so many moving parts, there's so many cards that interact with each other. It feels like you're spending more time checking desperately that you haven't forgotten to do something rather than just getting on and doing it. There's a lot to be said for a game that lets you push all the tokens and all the rules off the table and get right down into the world, and that's why I'm a big fan of so many Games Workshop board games, is because they usually have these very streamlined rule sets that just let you, with Space Hulk, you're in the corridors, you're down there, you're in there with the aliens, because you don't need to keep checking back, how many action points do I need to do this, what tokens do I have left to do this. You just know what you're doing and you can just do it. And maybe that's something that can come with time, with enough exposure to this game, but I honestly not sure whether I'm going to get that much exposure to it. Like I say, I'm going to play it a little bit more before I put my final thoughts into a written review. But as it stands at the moment, I'm in two minds, I guess, is the summation of a very long meander through my thought process. I think it's cleverly constructed. I guess that's probably the best way to sum it up, really, is that I can respect the level of skill that went into creating something that has so many moving parts and works together in the way it does, whilst having rules and things that do maintain that sense of theme. I mean, every character has a special ability, and like Daryl's, he's got a crossbow, and he has cards that say he fires a crossbow and says whenever you fire your crossbow, take one of your tokens. It'll say, so you'll have a set of these tokens. It'll say, put it on a space with a zombie, kill a zombie, and then you kill a zombie. And then it'll say, if you finish your turn on a space with one of your tokens, you can pick it up, and then you're allowed to take back into your hand your crossbow card, because it represents that you've fired an arrow, you've put it on the, you've killed a zombie with it, you've gone into the space, you've retrieved the arrow, so you can take that card back into your deck and use it again. That's really clever, and that's really cool. But at the same time, it's also micromanaging a token on the board. It all works, and you can see the cleverness of the way it's put together. But I think it's missing some of the heart, I guess. It's a game about zombies. Beating hearts and viscera should be something more at the forefront of the design process, and it's not. So yeah, I'm still not sure. But that's talking about the main cooperative mechanisms of the game. This Better Angel scenario, I'm not even going to worry about it again, because I don't think it's a good addition to the game. I don't, partly as well because obviously that it takes away the leader mechanism, where you've got a group of people and you have to sort of play those cards and then try and make everyone be compliant and avoid people playing defiant cards, and then you get stressed if they are defiant. That's a really cool mechanism that simulates the way a group of people under stress works together without actually having things like negotiation and those elements that you get from social games. So it's a really, really clever way to take a mechanical process to make an emotional process into a mechanical process. It works really nicely, and Better Angels takes that away. So it's taking away the main bit of the game, I think. And I guess that's enough from me for now. This has been a very long wrap-up. Thank you once again if you stuck with the series. If you didn't stick with the series but just sort of came in because you saw this was kind of like a review overview, do please consider going back, at least watching one or two of the episodes. Not least because, you know, I need all the support I can get, but also you might find it interesting. Stranger things have happened. Until then, that's the end of this series. I probably won't be revisiting The Walking Dead on camera, but I have loads of other stuff planned, and loads more playthroughs and reviews and unboxings and all kinds of cool stuff. And I hope you will consider, you know, subscribing, clicking that little bell icon that lets you know that I'm still jabbering, all that sort of stuff. I would appreciate it. Thank you very much, everybody, and bye bye for now. Bye bye.